There was once a woman who longed for a child of her own, though no child had come to her house. At last she went to a wise old woman and asked if there was any way such a wish might be granted. The old woman gave her a single barley corn and told her to plant it carefully. It was not the sort of grain that grows in ordinary fields. The woman placed it in a flower pot by the window, watered it, and waited. Soon a strange bud rose from the soil, closed as tightly as if it held a secret. When the flower opened, the woman bent close and gasped. Inside the petals sat a tiny girl, no longer than a thumb, delicate and bright as a drop of morning light. The woman named her Thumbelina. A walnut shell became her cradle, blue violet petals her mattress, and a rose leaf her blanket. By day, she sailed in a plate of water on a tulip petal, guiding herself with 2 white horsehairs for oars. She was so small that the whole cottage seemed like a kingdom, and the woman's lonely heart filled with wonder. One warm night, while Thumbelina slept in her walnut shell, an old toad hopped through the open window. The toad saw the tiny girl and thought she would make a fine bride for her clumsy son. Without asking, without pity, she lifted the cradle and carried Thumbelina away through the dark garden. By morning, the child woke on a broad water lily leaf in the middle of a stream. Around her, the bank seemed impossibly far away. The old toad and her son croaked about wedding plans, while Thumbelina sat trembling among the green leaves. The little fish beneath the water heard Thumbelina crying. They looked up through the clear stream and saw how unhappy she was. No creature so gentle, they thought, should be forced to marry a muddy toad in a dark bank. Together they nibbled at the stem of the lily leaf until it broke free. The current caught the leaf and carried Thumbelina away. The toads shouted from the shore, but they could not follow. Thumbelina drifted beneath the sky, frightened but free, while dragonflies shone like living jewels above the water. A cockchafer beetle saw Thumbelina floating by and thought she was the prettiest little creature he had ever seen. He caught her in his claws and flew up into a tree. At first he admired her and brought her honey from the flowers, but when other beetles gathered around, they wrinkled their feelers and said she was strange. She had only 2 legs, no wings, and no proper beetle shape at all. Their laughter made the cockchafer ashamed of his own delight. Soon he carried Thumbelina down and left her alone in the grass. All summer, Thumbelina lived by herself in the meadow. She wove a little bed from blades of grass, drank dew from leaves, and listened to birds singing high above her. In sunlight, the world seemed kind, and flowers gave her shelter. But as autumn came, the leaves yellowed and fell, the birds flew away, rain soaked the ground, and the wind grew sharp. Thumbelina's tiny hands trembled with cold. She had no house, no fire, and no one to call her own. When winter approached, the beautiful meadow became a place of hunger and fear. At last, nearly frozen, Thumbelina found a little door in the stubble field. It belonged to an old field mouse who lived warm and tidy beneath the earth with a storeroom of grain. Thumbelina asked for a crumb of food, and the mouse took pity on her. She allowed the child to stay through winter in exchange for keeping the room clean and telling stories. Thumbelina was grateful for warmth, but the underground house had low ceilings and no sky. Still, she swept carefully, told gentle tales, and tried not to think too often of sunlight. The field mouse had a neighbor, a wealthy mole who wore a fine black velvet coat and disliked the sun. He knew many things about tunnels, roots, and stored food, and the field mouse considered him an excellent match. When he visited, Thumbelina sang for him in her small, clear voice. The mole praised her, though he said birds were foolish creatures because they sang in summer and starved in winter. Thumbelina said nothing, but her heart tightened. The mouse began to speak of marriage, security, and a comfortable future underground. Thumbelina listened politely, feeling the sky slipping farther away. One day, the mole showed them a long tunnel between his house and the field mouse's. In the passage lay a swallow, still and cold, with folded wings. The mole declared it dead and spoke scornfully of birds who waste their lives in flight and song. But Thumbelina felt sorrow for the poor creature. That night, when the others slept, she crept back with a blanket of dry grass. She laid it over the swallow and pressed her cheek against its feathers. Then she heard the faintest heartbeat. The bird was not dead. It was only frozen and weak. All winter, Thumbelina cared for the swallow in secret. She brought water in a flower petal, crumbs from the field mouse's table, and soft grass to keep him warm. Slowly his strength returned. He told her of blue skies, warm countries, white marble palaces, and orange trees shining in the sun. Thumbelina listened, as if he were describing a dream she had once known. When spring came, the swallow stretched his wings and prepared to fly. He asked Thumbelina to come with him, but she would not leave without thanking the field mouse who had saved her from the cold. Spring brightened the world above, but Thumbelina remained underground. The field mouse was busy preparing her wedding to the mole. She spoke of velvet rooms, full pantries, and a husband of importance. Thumbelina tried to be obedient, yet every word felt like a stone placed over her heart. The mole was not cruel, but he loved darkness and silence, and he would never allow her to see the sun. Her wedding clothes were made, her future praised, and the date set for autumn. Thumbelina grew quieter each day, longing for the open air. On the morning before the wedding, Thumbelina asked permission to go outside and say farewell to the sun. The field mouse allowed it, thinking such fancies harmless. Thumbelina climbed through the doorway and stood among the stubble. Above her stretched the wide blue sky, endless and bright. Warmth touched her face, and tears filled her eyes. She said goodbye to the sun, the grass, and the singing world she believed she must lose forever. Then a familiar shadow swept over the field. The swallow had returned, circling low with a cry of joy. The swallow begged Thumbelina to come with him now, before the earth closed over her life. This time she did not refuse. She climbed onto his back and tied herself gently with a ribbon. Up they rose, over fields, forests, rivers, and mountains. The wind rushed around her, but she was not afraid. Below, the world spread wide and beautiful, and the dark tunnels of the mole vanished behind them. They flew toward warm countries where winter could not reach so easily, and Thumbelina felt, for the first time, that smallness did not mean helplessness. At last, the swallow carried her to a land of sunlight, white marble columns, and flowers taller than trees. He set her gently in the heart of a great blossom. There Thumbelina saw a tiny prince, no taller than herself, with clear eyes and delicate wings. Around him lived a whole people of flower spirits, graceful and kind. They were astonished by Thumbelina's beauty and by the long journey she had survived. The prince asked if she would stay among them, not as a prisoner or possession, but as someone free to choose her own happiness. Thumbelina's heart answered before her words did. She had been carried away, judged, hidden, sheltered, and nearly buried beneath another life. Here, at last, she was asked. She accepted the prince's friendship and love, and the flower people brought her a pair of clear wings, light as dragonfly glass. When they fastened them to her shoulders, she rose above the petals with wonder. She was no longer only the tiny girl in a walnut shell. She had crossed water, winter, darkness, and fear, and had found a place where her small voice mattered. The swallow stayed for a while among the warm flowers, but when the season changed, he knew he must fly back north. Thumbelina thanked him with all her heart. Without his kindness, she might have vanished into a life without sunlight. The swallow promised to carry her story wherever he flew, the tale of a tiny child who endured the wide world's dangers and found freedom not by becoming large, but by remaining brave. Then he rose into the blue air, while Thumbelina, winged and joyful among the blossoms, began a life chosen by her own heart.